Chapter 13 of The Cruise of the Snark. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Cruise of the Snark by Jack London. Chapter 13. The Stone Fishing of Bora Bora. At 5 a.m, the conchs began to blow. From all along the beach, the eerie sounds arose, like the ancient voice of war, calling to the fishermen to arise and prepare to go forth. We on the Snark likewise arose, for there could be no sleep in that mad din of conchs. Also, we were going stone fishing, though our preparations were few. Tatai Taora is the name for stone fishing, tatai meaning a fishing instrument, and taora meaning throne. But tatai taora, in combination, means stone fishing, for a stone is the instrument that is thrown. Stone fishing is in reality a fish drive, similar in principle to a rabbit drive or cattle drive, though in the latter affairs drivers and driven operate in the same medium. While in the fish drive the men must be in the air to breathe, and the fish are driven through the water. It does not matter if the water is 100 feet deep. The men, working on the surface, drive the fish just the same. This is the way it is done. The canoes form in line, 100 to 200 feet apart. In the bow of each canoe, a man wields a stone, several pounds in weight, which is attached to a short rope. He merely smites the water with the stone, pulls up the stone, and smites again. He goes on smiting. In the stern of each canoe, another man paddles, driving the canoe ahead and at the same time, keeping it in the formation. The line of canoes advances to meet a second line a mile or two away, the ends of the lines hurrying together to form a circle, the far edge of which is the shore. The circle begins to contract upon the shore, where the women, standing in a long row out into the sea, form a fence of legs, which serves to break any rushes of the frantic fish. At the right moment, when the circle is sufficiently small, a canoe dashes out from shore, dropping overboard a long screen of coconut leaves, and encircling the circle, thus reinforcing the palisade of legs. Of course, the fishing is always done inside the reef in the lagoon. Très joli, the gendarme said, after explaining by signs and gestures that thousands of fish would be caught of all sizes, from minnows to sharks, and that the captured fish would boil up and upon the very sand of the beach. It is a most successful method of fishing, while its nature is more that of an outing festival, rather than of a prosaic, food-getting task. Such fishing parties take place about once a month at Bora Bora, and it is a custom that is descended from old time. The man who originated it is not remembered. They always did this thing. But one cannot help wondering about that forgotten savage of the long ago, into whose mind first flashed this scheme of easy fishing, of catching huge quantities of fish without hook, or net, or spear. One thing about him we can know: he was a radical. And we can be sure that he was considered feather-brained and anarchistic by his conservative tribesmen. His difficulty was much greater than that of the modern inventor, who has to convince, in advance, only one or two capitalists. That early inventor had to convince his whole tribe in advance, for without the cooperation of the whole tribe, the device could not be tested. One can well imagine the nightly powwowings in that primitive island world, when he called his comrades antiquated mossbacks, and they called him a fool, a freak, and a crank, and charged him with having come from Kansas. Heaven alone knows at what cost of gray hairs and expletives he must finally have succeeded in winning over a sufficient number to give his idea a trial. At any rate, the experiment succeeded. It stood the test of truth. It worked. And thereafter, we can be confident, there was no man to be found who did not know all along that it was going to work. Our good friends, Tehai and Bahara, who were given the fishing in our honor, had promised to come for us. We were down below when the call came from on deck that they were coming. We dashed up the companionway to be overwhelmed by the sight of the Polynesian barge in which we were to ride. It was a long, double canoe, the canoes lashed together by timbers, with an interval of water between, and the whole decorated with flowers and golden grasses. A dozen flower-crowned Amazons were at the paddles, while at the stern of each canoe was a strapping steersman. All were garlanded with gold and crimson and orange flowers, while each wore about the hips a scarlet pareu. There were flowers everywhere, flowers, flowers, flowers without end. The whole thing was an orgy of color. On the platform forward resting on the bows of the canoes, Tehai and Bora were dancing. All voices were raised in a wild song or greeting. 3 times they circled the Snark before coming alongside to take Charmian and me on board. Then it was away for the fishing grounds, a 5-mile paddle dead to windward. Everyone is jolly in Bora Bora is the saying throughout the Society Islands, and we certainly found everybody jolly. Canoe songs, shark songs, and fishing songs were sung to the dipping of the paddles, all joining in on the swinging choruses. Once in a while the cry "Mao" was raised, whereupon all strained like mad at the paddles. Mao is shark, and when the deep sea tigers appear, the natives paddle for dear life for the shore, knowing full well the danger they run of having their frail canoes overturned and of being devoured. Of course, in our case, there were no sharks, but the cry of "Mao" was used to incite them to paddle with as much energy as if the shark were really after them. "Ho! Ho!" was another cry that made us foam through the water. On the platform, Tehai and Bora danced, accompanied by songs and choruses or by rhythmic hand-clappings. At other times, a musical knocking of the paddles against the side of the canoes marked the accent. A young girl dropped her paddle, leaped to the platform, and danced a hula, in the midst of which, still dancing, she swayed and bent and imprinted on our cheeks the kiss of welcome. Some of the songs, or hymns, were religious, and they were especially beautiful. The deep basses of the men, mingling with the altos and thin sopranos of the women, and forming a combination of sound that irresistibly reminded one of an organ. In fact, Kanaka organ is the scoffer's description of the hymn. On the other hand, some of the chants or ballads were very barbaric, having come down from pre-Christian times. And so, singing, dancing, paddling, these joyous Polynesians took us to the fishing. The gendarme, who is the French ruler of Bora Bora, accompanied us with his family in a double canoe of his own, paddled by his prisoners, for not only is he a gendarme and ruler, but he is jailer as well, and in this jolly land, when anybody goes fishing, all go fishing. A score of single canoes, with outriggers, paddled along with us. Around a point a big sailing canoe appeared, running beautifully before the wind as it bore down to greet us. Balancing precariously on the outrigger, 3 young men saluted us with the wild rolling of drums. The next point, half a mile farther on, brought us to the place of meeting. Here the launch, which had been brought along by Warren and Martin, attracted much attention. The Bora Borans could not see what made it go. The canoes were drawn upon the sand, and all hands went ashore to drink coconuts and sing and dance. Here our numbers were added to by many who arrived on foot from nearby dwellings, and a pretty sight it was to see the flower-crowned maidens, hand in hand and 2 by 2, arriving along the sands. They usually make a big catch, Alicott, a half-caste trader, told us. At the finish, the water is fairly alive with fish. It is lots of fun. Of course, you know, all the fish will be yours. All, I groaned, for already the Snark was loaded down with lavish presents by the canoe load of fruits, vegetables, pigs, and chickens. Yes, every last fish, Alicott answered. You see, when this round is completed, you, being the guest of honor, must take a harpoon and impale the first one. It is the custom. Then everybody goes in with their hands and throws the catch out on the sand. There will be a mountain of them. Then one of the chiefs will make a speech in which he presents you with the whole kit and boodle. But you don't have to take them all. You get up, and make a speech, selecting what fish you want for your